Welcome, everyone. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone. And the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded, and the public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of our agenda, and can also provide written testimony to the board via email at utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. So, PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted towards people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. And this means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. And what that means is speaking up and speaking out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of this board and always focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct, not the person.
Hi, my name's Amy, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak and who you're addressing. The chat box is only viewable by me, so please limit to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you have been waiting to speak and have not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. I may lower your hand once you've begun speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can raise their hands and you'll be called on when appropriate. Press *9 if you're connecting by phone to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when you're speaking if desired. It is not required. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And if you're connecting by phone, you can press *6 to mute or unmute. Public comment will be taken during the public comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with myself or raise your hand during the comment period. Public comment will also be available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. The agenda, I will pass back to you, though it's brief, and then we can jump into the content.
All right, so I believe the agenda for today, see if we have any public comment, and then we'll be spending the rest of the hour and a half, I'm not sure on the length of this meeting, my apologies, on the city organizational structure, having a conversation on it, and I believe reviewing the official statement that was sent out via email.
And apologies for that. I just reused an old slide and I didn't change the time. The adjourn is at 12 o'clock as planned.
Bless. Good to hear. All right. So as we start, are there any disclosures of communications by board members?
I'll just say that I've been making the rounds on this and several other issues on an ongoing basis, and that'll continue going forward as well. That's city council, staff, and so on behalf of Riverkeeper.
Thank you for that disclosure, Bob. Any other disclosures before we start our conversation? All right. I'm not seeing any. Now is the time for public comment. Amy, have we received any written comment, or are there any members of the public that would like to speak currently?
I've not received a request in advance, so if you're in the room and wish to speak, please just raise your hand or unmute yourself.
All right. And so with no public comment, we can start our conversation. And because I have been absent for the last, for September's meetings, I think I know generally what we'll be discussing, but I'll definitely be leaning heavily on Amy and the rest of you to assist me with this one. Amy specifically, wonderful, yes. I read this letter and I wasn't sure if this was going to be, have we like voted on this being the official statement, or is
No,
this
we
something
have
we're
not.
adding in
So
today?
at the last meeting, we did not have time to really discuss the specifics of the potential for testimony, but there was enough discussion to make it clear that board members didn't want to miss this opportunity to submit some feedback by the September 29th deadline, which is this week. During the meeting, Bob had indicated a willingness to start drafting something, and then subsequently we decided to try to schedule this meeting. So in the interim, the draft that I have on the screen is the version that Bob did all the hard work, and then I just did really minor edits. And so it gives us a potential starting point. So I have it on the screen in case that's where we want to start and work off of this. If the board wants to approach it differently and instead, develop some other talking points, then we could also take that way. But Bob was pretty thorough in capturing some of what had been discussed and some of his personal interest, but also made it very clear that, he also will be submitting comment from Riverkeepers and as an individual. And so if there's content that PUB does not want in the letter, then, we just need to flag that and pull it out. So at this point, I'm just open to feedback from the group and either working from this document or just beginning with some brainstorm of ideas.
All right. Well, before we get started, just want to thank you, Amy, as well as Bob, for starting this draft. I was able to read into it, so I know that both of you have put in some hard work into it. And let's get the conversation started with Lorraine. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if Bob wanted to go through at a high level the points that were raised in the letter, so that we're all having a better understanding on where it's coming from.
Sure. No, I'm happy to do that. Thanks for suggesting that. First off, totally feel free to have at it. I won't be offended in any way, shape, or form. So whatever I missed or overstated or what you want changed or taken out, I just tried to get a lot of thoughts down on the page that have been rattling around in my head. And as was said, I'll also make comments on behalf of Riverkeeper, so we'll get them in regardless. But I wanted to kind of put them out there for people just to consider. The high points really are that this is probably, really without question, the biggest restructuring we've seen in decades of these bureaus. And it will, to a greater or lesser extent, pull a lot of the natural resource folks out of the bureaus. And that's not just, that's all kinds of folks that are behind environmental projects, environmental justice programs, permitting and compliance issues. So, and we've been going for a long time toward a system where it was integrated. That was always kind of the goal, was to make sure that these things were truly integrated, that gray and green infrastructure went hand in hand, for example. So this is kind of going back the other direction and saying, no, it'd be better off having these things separate in their own bureau. And as somebody that's tracked it for a long time, I like the first approach better, but I think it's failing at this point. And when something's failing, maybe it's time to take a look at a different approach and shake things up. And so, just speaking as somebody who's a natural resource advocate, I think this has real potential. And a way of sort of jumpstarting programs that have kind of gotten sleepy over the last several years in some ways, been reinvigorated in others. But I look at this as a chance to really jump things forward. But I wanted to hit on a number of issues that I think are really important in order to make this function. And the first really is budget, because I think there's a huge risk that you take all these programs out of these bureaus where they're funded by rates, and you stick them on the general fund, and then it becomes a little like parks, where you're always in this deficit situation and you're always struggling for funds and you're always laying people off. And so making sure that this has a sound financial base, including potentially the rates, and the justification for the rates is a lot of this is surface stormwater. It is the mission written into both BES and water. So it's totally appropriate to be on the rates. And that was adjusted 6 or 7 years ago to make sure that the alignment was truly there. So the first is, does it have a robust funding strategy that is sustainable? The second was, does it really have a connection back to these infrastructure bureaus? Because this new Bureau of Natural Resources won't have a whole lot of, it's not going to have trucks and engineers necessarily, and all these things that you need to do projects. It's going to be more of a advisory bureau and a policy bureau. And does it really have the ability to reach back into BES and water and also transportation and parks to make sure that they continue to consider green infrastructure and environmental justice and things like that in all of their projects? Because again, that's always been the goal. And whether we get there through this strategy or the existing one doesn't matter that much to me, but it does matter to me that these agencies continue to have these things at their core. Or is it going to be a situation where you have this standalone bureau that kind of has to beg and plead with other bureaus to do green things? And I think that's a real danger too. When this bureau walks in and makes a recommendation, people say, well, that's nice, but that's not our priority, or we don't have the funding, or you should have been here earlier. The third is to really describe what's going to be within the bureau, what actually moves and what doesn't. When we got the presentation, they talked about certain things moving, but other things like Bull Run not moving, and Superfund, maybe it moves. And so really understanding what they're proposing. Again, there's not a right or wrong answer there, but it would really be good to have that clearly delineated. And it should not just be the projects or processes that the bureaus find annoying. And some of this green stuff they certainly find annoying. So, there's a risk that they're just jettisoning the things that they'd like to get rid of, holding on to the things they like. We don't want this new bureau to just be a repository for things other bureaus don't want to deal with. So how do we make something that's holistic and complete? And then, Lorraine, you brought up, as I recall, how this affects people and jobs and who gets moved and how those decisions are made. So I tried to put that in there. And the last thing was really environmental justice and how that's going to be infused into this new bureau. And I think there could be actually additional language about the transition process as well there. But how does that fit into this mission? And, if you're creating a new bureau, how do you build that in from the ground up? It's an opportunity to kind of walk our talk there, as opposed to trying to layer it on after bureau is created, trying to sort of retrofit the bureau. If you're building a new bureau, it should be there from its inception. So those are kind of the main things that I tried to hit on.
All right, Bob, thank you for that rundown. Okay, so with that, does anyone have a specific area of the letter that we'd like to go into a little bit? Anything that needs to be edited or something that possibly was still overlooked?
Robin, this is Karen. Could I put my virtual hand up?
Yeah, jump in, please.
Are there, as long as there's no other hands up, I just didn't get to that button fast enough. If not, I would, thanks, Bob. Awesome. Thanks for your eloquence, your thoughtfulness. I will say the two aspects of what you shared, Bob, that were on my list as potential concerns. So I'll just, I don't know, I mean, virtually, I guess, highlight those. And that is in this new Natural Resource Bureau, if that's what we're calling it, how is that going to be funded, and what is the relationship to fees there? So I just wanted to highlight, thank you for bringing that forward. And the second aspect that was concerning to me about, sort of, as you say, sort of separating out natural resource functions or tasks and people that serve in those areas, is what will the Natural Resource Bureau's responsibilities be regarding regulatory compliance? I mean, where will the compliance with total maximum daily load requirements, with water quality certifications, I mean, state and federal rules and permits, I mean, will that still live in the bureaus, meaning Portland Water Bureau and Bureau of Environmental Services, or is that somehow also going to shift into the Natural Resource Bureau? So to me, that's very unclear as where environmental compliance will live. So thank you for among all the other things that you highlighted, those were two that I definitely share your concerns. I would like to put on the table three more aspects. I think this comment letter pretty much focused on the Natural Resource Bureau is, I mean, I think that probably is our, I guess maybe strongest connection directly with PUB's sort of advisory breadth or scope. But I wanted to put three more things on the table. And that is a comment on the equity officer position and implications, a comment on where asset management will live in the new structure, and a comment about the placement of, I guess, staffing, also not very clear, for advisory boards in a new community affairs bureau, I think it's called, or community affairs section. So I'll just try and give kind of like a one sentence to each of those 3 points, or each of those 3 topical areas. I'd like to see PUB, let's see, comment positively on the proposed structures, resourcing of an equity officer, and their placement on an executive leadership team. So I think that that's a sort of a move in the right direction for elevating workforce equity progress. And I have questions and potential concerns about will that very high level position, I just want to make sure that that a high level executive position remains connected and truly learning from the work that is done, on the ground, like in the bureaus, through the equity managers, through the staff, right, through the affinity groups and employee resource groups that have been putting forward ideas and concerns and for years, right, through employee engagement surveys, through their own surveys and outreach they have done amongst each other and amongst say BIPOC staff at the city. So yes, positively comment on the resourcing for an authoritative, I guess, or an officer with authority focused on equity. Yes, and make sure that that builds on all the sort of grassroots and staff work that has been done on equity over the last many years. Okay, that was more than one sentence, sorry. Second aspect, I'll try to be a little bit more concise. so the placement of asset management in, I've lost track and I'm not looking at the flow chart right now, but it was, I think maybe it was in operations. I can't quite remember which service area it was placed, but my concern again is how will that placement outside of the bureaus sort of intersect with the asset management, I don't know, priorities or within the bureaus themselves. And I'm just thinking of the BES restructuring that happened a few years ago. Asset management is sort of as I understand it, is kind of the basis or the framework from which BES is prioritizing and identifying priorities and carrying through and implementing those priorities. So I am just wondering about having an asset management sort of function outside the bureaus that have most of the assets. Is that going to create redundancies, or are there going to be, again, is a lot of work that's already been done going to be kind of lost, and we're going to sort of start over from another place. And then the third aspect that I would like to highlight on the advisory boards is I'm concerned, I guess, is the word, about the advisory boards now. We don't really report to anyone, but I guess our sort of point of contact, or the person to whom we are sending our recommendations and so forth, appears to be the deputy city administrator. So in one sense, having a very high level executive to report to is good, I guess, but it's also pretty far removed from, I don't know, sort of the day-to-day, or it's kind of far removed from the weeds of the kinds of things that we get into. And since in the past, we've had an opportunity to comment and make recommendations directly to the, essentially the administrators that were responsible for running the bureaus, it seems like, we're sort of, I'm concerned that the advisory board recommendations will be kind of diluted or become a little bit less relevant, because they're going to be delivered at a much higher level than the folks that are actually carrying out, right, and sort of doing the day-to-day operations and work in the bureaus. So, maybe at least, rather than advisory boards sort of being presenting recommendations to the deputy administrator, having the deputy city administrator, maybe having them provide recommendations to the service area deputy administrators. So there's a lot of deputy administrators there. But so presenting recommendations, say, to the deputy administrator for the public works service area, to me seems, for us, right, for PUB, that would seem a little bit more appropriate. Time for me to be quiet. Thanks, Amy, for noting all that. And
thank you, Karen, for your
yeah.
your analysis. That was wonderful. While Amy finishes up that, I believe Chris is next. Go ahead.
My only concern is, like what Bob was saying, with the funding. Generally, especially after the Anderson lawsuit, it is difficult to pay for things once they've been moved out of the bureau. So I would be very concerned about moving things out of the bureaus and then hoping the funding is going to truly follow. That's all I wish to bring to everyone's attention.
Thank you, Chris. Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to Karen for covering almost all of my thoughts. The one that I was going to highlight of her many thoughts that I really agree about the who we're reporting to matters, and capturing our suggestions to how to update that in a way that makes more sense for us and increases our effectiveness, and intended impact. I will also say, um, it would be great, I think, in the last paragraph to be a little bit more direct or explicit about a desire to, if this is true for everyone, but I think it would be good for us to more assertively say we want to have a meeting with Michael Jordan, and maybe we need to deputize a liaison from the pub to, be that kind of direct communication, or maybe a couple of people if we want more than one, as well as Amy. We need a pub staff, I think, who can help facilitate, and bring kind of like the staff perspective to those meetings. But I just think that if we're not really assertively trying to advocate for ourselves beyond just the letter, that I'm worried it's just kind of easy for them to like check the box of just having read it, So anyway, if people feel like we have the capacity to really request a timely meeting and to deputize someone within the pub to attend that meeting, I just think it would be really good for us to have a stronger influence on the process.
I like that, Julia. Thank you. Alexis, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Bob, for putting some initial thoughts down on paper. It's super helpful to have this to work from. And then Karen, you said basically word for word the additions that I had as well, but I do want to, so the things that were top of my mind as I read through the proposed structure was, how is the Bureau of Natural Resources funded and what are the key responsibilities that will go there? So I am appreciative of that being kind of called out here in multiple ways. Similarly with the asset management piece, would like just to kind of build from what Karen had said, yeah, if it's going to live outside of this, what is the plan for linkages there across the different bureaus, kind of up to this, where is it? City operations area. And then, sorry, hang on, I'm looking over my notes. And then around the advisory boards, similarly, I'd like to understand a little bit more, like, will PUB remain as it currently is, focused on water and environmental services? Will there be another board for natural resources? I feel like we just have a lot of questions around what these advisory boards are going to look like. And I'm glad to see like that there's dedicated, like at a higher level, that there's dedicated staff there, but then curious, yeah, about who we would be reporting to. And then if we would need to be kind of working with other boards in order to make those recommendations, and if things get lost in the mix in that way, I think that just a little bit more here, or encourage the city to think more about what these sorts of participatory and advisory boards, what their role is and how they'll be able to effectively advise. And I know that's something that we've been kind of discussing and grappling with as we go along here. And then I support Julia's suggestion to ask for a specific meeting in here as well for follow-up, because I agree, like otherwise, a list of questions and recommendations may just get lost in the mix. And so I think having a meeting and kind of hearing their responses, or at least like requesting written response, or that they come to a future meeting would be super helpful.
All right, thank you, Alexis. Lorraine, go ahead.
So, as everyone is talking, I'm like, okay, let me read up this thing about this. The service areas also included to be determined natural resources grouping. And I was like, okay, did I miss the definition of what that means? And my understanding, it's still being developed. So who is involved in that conversation? I'm just curious about it because you know, there's many reference even here within the pub about this natural resources grouping, that natural recommendations on how the city can best approach natural resources and the environment, including climate. Okay, those are sexy words with, you know, that can mean many things. And I'm wondering, okay, what does that mean? And I don't know if I even feel comfortable making assumptions about what that mean. So my question is, what assumptions are being made by what that means by pub members? Probably that's how I should frame my question.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand the question. Are you talking about the definition of natural resources? What are you asking for clarity on in terms of definitions?
Since this whole proposal for the natural resources grouping, and I'm reading exactly from the website, right? It says the service area includes a to be determined natural resources grouping, ongoing conversations between 5 bureaus, BPS, PWAT, PWB, BES, PPNR will lead the recommendations for how the city can best approach natural resources and the environment, including climate. I was asking, have we determined what the city means when it says natural resources and the environment, including climate? That's what I'm asking, and my understanding is it's still being developed. So, what are the assumptions are being made about what it means, or what it looks like?
Thank you. I didn't that's very helpful. So I think that's a really fair question then for us to include in this letter, to just ask for that clarity. I thought you were asking us what our definitions were, and I was just kind of, so trying to suss out the underlying assumptions feels like a good idea.
It's kind of asking that because I'm hearing it being referenced here, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what definition we are using. So it's kind of asking that, and you know, if we don't have that clarity, then I would love to know.
It's a really broad issue area, so I do think it's kind of a laundry list. Bob probably has it off the top of his head better than I do, in terms of what natural resources means. And if you layer climate on top of that, I mean, climate intersects with kind of everything, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we're concerned about the idea of separating it out from being more integrated, because like ideally natural resources considerations and climate should be something that is happening throughout bureaus within the city. So, but yeah, I don't know that there's a pithy definition. I don't know if I could take a stab at that. Sorry, I'm totally speaking out of turn. But anyway, I was also just trying to understand your question. So thank you.
Yeah, sorry, my computer died, so I just got back on. I think it's a great question, and I don't think we have an answer to that, because it could be a very expansive definition or it could be a very narrow definition, and they haven't provided us with any real indication of that. And I've heard a variety of different things that are being considered from different people. No one seems to really know, but for example, I heard a rumor that they're talking about the Sustainability Commission that just split off from the Planning and Sustainability Commission, maybe becoming the commission for this. Now, I don't want to start rumors, but that has all kinds of implications to it, good and bad, and in between. So I tried to get at that in the letter, but maybe it could be put more front and center, that we really do want to understand what they're proposing to move into this bureau and what its mission's really going to be and how it's going to connect everything. So I tried to come at it from multiple ways, but maybe it would make sense to call out the fact early that right now it's just a shell based on the information we have. I also tried to get it in some of those bullet points at maybe what we hope to see in terms of what this might look like, but I did not try to define the scope. So it could be a very massive bureau if it included, what we think of as traditional natural resources, trees, parks, natural areas, or natural areas, wetlands, and things like that. You start to bring in climate, it brings in all kinds of policy considerations on top of those. And then the built environment, how do we do sustainable building and green building and end of tailpipe solutions and things like that. Then it becomes a fairly mammoth bureau at that point.
Lorraine, go ahead.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks, Julia. And I am, I'm always quite comfortable saying, putting forward my ignorance in this space. So when you hear from me, I think you're getting a level of the reality of some sort of ignorance from the community, because what does this mean to them, right? And that is why I was asking the question, because even Julia, in your attempt to answer the question, I think you're coming from a place of your understanding of your knowledge. I shouldn't say an understanding, your knowledge in that sphere. But when we are talking, as a advocacy, representing communities, sometimes we need to really step back and say, okay, I'm coming from this knowledge base, but what does this mean to communities? And I am by no means that environmentalist or anything. I have a niece who just completed her degree in that space, and she's educating me. But by no means I'm an expert. And that is where I come from, in that when we are having these conversations and in our advocacy role, that we need to sometime, remind ourselves, this is not me calling out anybody, right? I'm just telling you, because my limited knowledge, when I'm hearing you all talking about this, I'm like, okay, where is this information? Where is it defined? Where can I read to understand it? Because I have my own meaning of environment. I have my own meaning of natural resources, right? My country of birth, I know we have natural gas. I know we have oil. I know, we have sun, we have beaches and all these different things. But what does that mean in this instance? So that's where I'm coming from. I just wanted to share that little background on why it is I'm asking this question, or these.
So I don't think that's a question based on ignorance at all, honestly, Lorraine. I think it's a question based on the fact that they haven't even told us what goes in it. And let me just ask this, if this would help in the letter, maybe a paragraph above the bullets that says, as currently proposed, a Bureau of Natural Resources is just a shell. The city hasn't really defined what would go into it, and even more importantly, what it wants it to accomplish. these things are foundational pieces that are necessary in order both for the public to understand what is being proposed and to shape this new bureau in an effective manner. Does that help get at that?
Julia, go ahead.
Is Lorraine having technical issues though?
I'm here.
Oh, good. I just wonder, is what Bob said kind of helping get to what you're asking for before I jump in?
Yeah, it's just that I think the key thing is for us to be clear that we have made no assumptions on what this is. And the reason why I'm saying that is that I am hearing that there are a lot of assumptions being made based on, Bob mentioned he's heard certain things, and some people with that knowledge in this field kind of thing. I am just saying, based on my perception of this, I am like, what is this? I'm making no assumptions here, right? But because by us making assumptions, we are implying certain things. And I would prefer to say, hey, what does this mean? Because right, and that is what I wanted to get to. I hope that helps.
No, that definitely helps. And I just wanted to say, in no way did I feel called out. You spoke very, very carefully, and I'm like, I'm all about what's going on. So like, I don't feel way called out, and I think it's a really important conversation because what I feel like is really helpful with what you're bringing up right now. One of the aspects that's really helpful here is like, we actually always need to remember to look at this from the 30,000 foot perspective, like, and ask the really foundational questions. Because if we're not doing that, then like we might be missing assumptions that are being made in multiple directions from us and from the city, right? So I think it's actually really wise for you to help lift us out of that. So I just really appreciate your ability to try to think about this from the broader perspective and getting us out of the weeds a little bit. So I think that's a really good thing to point out. And I just had to ask questions to help wrap my mind around what you were saying. So I thank you for, going on that journey with me and for proposing this approach, because I completely agree. We need to constantly be checking our assumptions and asking these foundational questions. So thank you.
All right.
Welcome.
And with that, it looks like Alexis has their hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to support the addition of this language that we can see right now. Yeah, and thanks. I'll also just say, like, it's a funny thing to have a new bureau kind of proposed in here, and then it just says pending ongoing assessments in the chart. And I know that we had a presentation about this process maybe a few meetings ago, earlier this summer, and it was very much like, we're still in a listening mode in a strategy session and thinking about it, etc. And so I think calling that out specifically here, that it is just a shell, and having some more information about what is included there. And then I think the specificity that follows about, like, what are the functions? How is it going to be funded? What are the staffing implications? What's going to fall under this proposed new bureau will kind of help the city think through the implications of this, and also connect it back to that ongoing process that we heard about a few months ago. So thanks for adding this language. That's it.
All right, I'm gonna raise my hand and take off my chair hat and just be a pub member. And I like what everyone has added, as well as the basic structure that Bob has offered. And reviewing some of the information that was provided to us as read ahead also has me wondering, if this is such a huge, this is a huge reorganization, like why is the city not specifically proposing like advisory body, everyone who's in an advisory body with the city come to this community meeting specifically for city advisory body, so that we can know as members of the public and as hopefully educated members of the public, because we do get a sneak peek into the background, to the back end of all of it, like we're coming at this solely as one advisory body. We could possibly have greater power if we acknowledge, if we like link up with other advisory bodies to be like, hey, we're kind of, we're as knowledgeable as we can be, but we don't necessarily know that we're really being engaged in the way that's necessary. And so I hear about community stakeholder meetings that I think are still open, actively not yet happened. But I specifically am wondering if there's value in having a centralized meeting with everyone that's on an advisory body and having that conversation, rather than specifically requesting individual advisory bodies come into it and give their individual opinion. That'll wrap up my 2 cents. And yeah, that's not to take away from the fact that we are writing an individual letter, but I think it's something that we could add on top of it as like a, hey, this is our 2 cents, but we could be really empowered if all of the advisory bodies had a space where we could come together and have a shared conversation rather than just submitting our letters individually. With that, I saw Julia's hand go up and then Karen.
Sorry, I know I've been speaking a lot, but I'm on another commission that's doing a similar process for themselves, and I'm sure all of them are doing similar processes for themselves. And I think it's actually and there are structures that are going to be baked into this new structure or there might be new structures created. They're talking about having that kind of like advisory board that has a representative from every one of the boards and commissions within the city to report directly to council. So there's like a little bit, or have them report directly to the city administrator. But either way, it's like, it's not a bad idea, it's like, but I just think it's really interesting that everyone is just kind of like lobbying for themselves and not necessarily talking to each other, because we're all in different areas and have different needs. But it's like, I think collectively, all the boards and commissions represent the public, we represent the people of the city and the way in which we're supposed to be able to like interact with and affect decision making on like a whole broad array of issues. And I agree with you that there would be a real value in that. I think it is innately really hard for us to all collectively coordinate like that. And I love the idea of doing it. I just have no idea how we can initiate it as a board, other than maybe just make a recommendation in the letter that like Michael Jordan, I'm like literally externally processing in a public meeting. I'm sorry, y'all. But this might be the way to do it, is to request that there be a process that convenes like a representative from every board and commission to kind of talk about how we collectively think the city should be ensuring that we all have the right amount of like access to the right people to effectively communicate the public's needs. So anyway, I'm not exactly sure how to phrase that, but it's like, I'm glad you're proposing that, you're bringing that up, because it feels like a lot of disparate boards and commissions, kind of like yelling and like raising their hand or whatever and sending polite letters and like asking for meetings. And it's like, there would really be value to kind of a collective effort here. So it's not a bad thing to ask for. It'd be cool if other commissions did the same.
Thank you for that support, Julia. Go ahead, Karen, and then let's wrap it up with Lorraine, because I think we're going to need to figure out who wants to kindly volunteer to finalize the letter. So go ahead, Karen.
Okay, I promise I'll be quick. Building on the concept, Julia and Robin, that you just floated, I totally support that. And I would suggest that we put that, let's say, overture right at the beginning of the letter. And I'm suggesting that we use as a jumping off point the September 13th letter that Michael Jordan sent specifically to advisory bodies. And we could say, we're responding to the letter that you sent us, and we're responding in the forum that's available to us right now, which is essentially general public comment, right? And here you go. Here's our letter. But we think it would be more, all the great things you, Robin and Julia just said, that, it would be more effective if we could have a meeting of advisory board representatives with Michael Jordan and all those things you just said. But I would suggest kind of putting that up front. It's almost like an introduction to our letter. Here's our comments in response to the letter that you sent us, Michael Jordan, as an advisory body. And, in the future, we'd like to have more interaction and we'd like to have a meeting with you and all those things. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Let me lower my hand. I just wanted to circle back to this whole public engagement process with regard to the city, right? I was just looking again. I I like to refer to what's provided, right? As I was looking back at the draft charter recommendations, there is a part in it that talks about the engagement, right? We're talking about what type of engagement we're asking, what kind of open, and it was also very vague, right? It says something where it is, I just lost it. I don't know. I was looking at it. It just says that X amount of committee meetings or public whatever was held, but if I'm missing it, someone please point it out to me. It doesn't capture what feedback was received from the public. If I missed it, someone pointed out to me, and what trends showed up from that feedback. And I just wanted to talk about it, because when I was at the city and in my role, one of my roles was in engagement. The IAP2 have a spectrum of public participation. And I just wanted to say, you can inform, you can consult, you can involve, you can collaborate, or you can empower. So I think I am curious to know, from what I am seeing or the assumptions I am making, and I'm putting my assumptions out there, is that the whole process has been to inform, and this whole process, from what I can see, is that the expediency is already on the table. And that is one of the main barriers to having true engagement with community. And this is not me criticizing or whatever. It's a fact that Michael Jordan has been handed an assignment, and he's getting it done. And there's a limited time period. So I just wanted to put that there, that when we have to be cognizant of the fact of, when we talk about public participation, if we just check in the box, and if we check in the box, let us be transparent about that. So when later on the communities catch up and realize that, oh my God, this is not making sense, that it is clear that the city, we did engagement. So that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to share as the last thing.
All right, thank you, Lorraine. And I think that that's a good place to bring it back to, which is we're here engaging as members of the public, and to always bring it back to how engaged is the public on the affairs that we're doing. So with that, Amy, if you want to assist me, is this essentially where we would call for volunteers, or because we don't have everyone here, would that be more of a request via email?
No, so it's due in 2 days, so we do need to move pretty quickly. So it would be great to have just 1 or 2 people who, would volunteer to make sure that we capture the sentiment of everything that was discussed in the meeting today. And then you would want to take a formal vote to then delegate to staff and any volunteers to finalize the feedback and submit it based on the discussion today. So I guess the first piece would just be to flag and make sure that there's general agreement with everything that's been said and nothing else missing. The one piece regarding that is I just want to clarify with Lorraine. I think you articulated it very well, the reality of their engagement process and the timeline constraints. Are you suggesting that we reflect that in the feedback letter as well as kind of the precursor to the engagement that PUB is asking for? I just wanted to make sure that that lined up with what your expectation was.
I think so, because, and even was it Julia who said, hey, yeah, we probably need to pull some advisory. That was in the room with what time we have, right? There is a time limit. There's that, this needs to happen now. And I think that that is a good grounding place to say that hey, this is the reality of that the driving force behind this is getting something done. And we want to highlight the limitations on getting that something done, which is I attended one of the meetings. I don't know if I was supposed to, some time ago, and it really wasn't, it was basically them talking to communities, right, and attempting to answer questions. Did they answer questions well? It was a lot of, well, it's a lot of things still to be determined kind of thing. So I'm like, really? And then I'm like, okay, where is that captured? Where is that feedback or questions or types of questions or buckets of questions? What are the trends that came out of these things? What are the questions that they were hearing that was similar? What are the concerns that the community was sharing? What are the areas the community was supporting? What are the, so to have that information somewhere would be good. And if it's not, then let's acknowledge that the engagement process was informing, just be transparent.
That's helpful. I am
All right.
going to pull up on screen then just a sample.
Wonderful. And just for clarity, Amy, whoever is volunteering, we are to understand that this letter is due in like 2 days, and thus would need to have time in the next 24 to 48 hours to help complete this. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I will take a first stab this afternoon just at integrating some of what I heard in the meeting today. And then I would need ideally 1 or 2 people just to review it and make sure that I've hit the mark accurately from what the group agreed to.
I'm willing to take another look, although most of the suggestions today that are being added are from other folks. So I'm happy to help out if it's useful.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else want to also review it before it's final?
This is Robin. I have the capacity to review it. I just don't know how much time I have in the next couple of days to do heavy edits or anything.
Okay, I will then rely on at least Bob, but Robin also, I'll copy you on everything. So I guess then the floor is open for somebody to make a motion.
This is Robin. I motion that we approve the draft feedback with changes discussed today and that we delegate to pub staff as well as Bob and myself to finalize and submit feedback for the city on behalf of the pub.
This is Chris
Karen,
Richards, second.
Is there any formal discussion? How about any public comment today? All right, so unless our member of the public raises their hand in the next couple of seconds, it looks like we'll be on to a vote. I believe I'm listed as the first voter, so this is Robin Castro, voting member, and I vote yes.
This is Chris Richard, voting member. I vote yes.
Karen Williams, voting member, yes.
Bob Salinger, voting member, yes.
Lorraine Wilson, voting member, yes.
Julia DeGraw, voting member, yes.
Alexis Rafe, voting member, yes.
All right, I believe the motion is approved, and so we will work on the letter on the back end of that, things. And with that, other than just being mindful of what to expect with our upcoming pub meeting on the 3rd, any carryover from today, of course, and then the rate study update, as well as updates on our tour. But with that, I'll pass it over to Amy if there's anything else, and then I think we'll adjourn the meeting.
I think that's all I had on my end, so we can consider the meeting adjourned.